Okay, thank you, Gareth. So thanks very much to the BGS and the IEA for the invitation to be here today. I joined the Coal Authority around about a year ago, so I joined their innovation team, and my remit is really to help with the promotion and the development of the UK's abandoned mine geothermal resource. So my background is I'm a geologist and hydrogeologist, and I've got around about 20 years experience of working with abandoned mines, which started with mine water treatment. That's what my first interest was in. But in doing that, I realised there was some temperature in the water I was dealing with. And so from that time onwards, I've been kind of really passionate about trying to push this as an energy source for the future. So what we're doing today, this is very much a forward-looking presentation. The title was originally put forward by Jeremy Crooks, who sadly passed away in January, so I'm hoping that I can do some of his ideas and enthusiasm justice today with my presentation when we think about how mine energy could be part of a smart system. And I was really excited by Florian's presentation because I think that links really well with a lot of the stuff we'd like to do, and very envious of some of the experimental kit and the boreholes that he's got going there. So we'd be very interested to talk more about that as well. So my colleague Bo yesterday did more detail on what we're doing specifically on mine energy, but I realised there may have been some of you didn't join us for that yesterday. So just a very brief introduction to ourselves. We're a non-departmental government body, and we actually own the subsurface deep mining infrastructure, and we license access to it. But we don't own the water within the abandoned mine workings, and we don't own the heat within the water either. And we're not a regulator, and at the moment we don't have an intention to be a regulator on that. I know that came up a bit yesterday, so I thought it might be helpful to clarify that. But you do need permission from ourselves to effectively enter our property by drilling boreholes. That's something that we license. And the reason the mine energy is such an opportunity for us is because there's a good correlation between where the abandoned coal fields are and where the heat demands are. And that's not surprising because of the fact that so many towns and cities grew on the strength of the coal reserves that were beneath them. So what we've got now is we've got round about 23,000 abandoned deep coal mines across the UK. And we've also got places across the coal fields where we either pump or water comes out under gravity, and we treat that or not as necessary. And that happens at around about over 80 sites. And combining the amount of heat available from those sites is around about 100 megawatts, which is currently essentially going to atmosphere. So that's a really strong area of interest for us. You know, where can we look at these as a starting point for mine energy? So as I've just mentioned, where we've got the mine water treatment schemes, we can tap into the resource, the mine energy resource at surface. And my colleague Bo talked about our symposium project yesterday, and there's some more information about that on our website, or we can happily follow up on any of these things afterwards. But where mine water is not accessible at surface, then obviously you're looking at drilling boreholes to access the mine water. And I just thought the presentation by David Banks yesterday was really good in highlighting some of the pros and cons associated with doing that. The diagram here shows a kind of standard setup of the way we would deploy mine energy. And I'm not going to dwell too much on that today because we'll be talking about the kind of smart system aspirations for mine energy going forwards. But just to give you a bit of a case study, so the Gateshead project that we're currently working with Gateshead Council on, this is very much their scheme, and they've accessed government funding from the HNIP, Heat Network Investment Project, to develop an extension to an existing heat network they have. So they've got a 3 megawatt scheme that's currently running off gas-fired CHP, and they're planning to add another 3 megawatts to that using the mine water source. So they're effectively doubling their the heat that they're supplying and doubling the size of the network. And the intention here is that they can kind of knock back the CHP, so that will be running less, and therefore the CO2 emissions associated with the heat network will drop because the mine energy will be carrying half of the demand at least. So at the moment on this, we're doing purpose drilling boreholes. These are exploration boreholes at the moment, and we're looking to drill to depths of 150 metres and 50 metres for both abstraction. And one of the things I will say on these projects, what we're doing is we are having more than one site where we abstract from, so that you've got a bit of flexibility and resilience in the system. So we're looking at maybe having multiple abstraction wells and then one for re-injection, possibly two if that's necessary. A lot of what Florian just showed us previously was very relatable to us in terms of having drilled through the workings. That's what we've been doing. So it'd be really interesting to talk more on that, about, you know, what you found and relating to what we've found. And this is just a reason for kind of why we're looking at this. And this is again another kind of case study which Bo talked about, the kind of how the scheme works in more detail yesterday, but just looking at the sustainability point of view of it. So this is again from the Symposium Garden Village, which was for a development of 1,500 homes initially, with further phases to come. And this basically, this graph is showing what the CO2 emissions would be associated with that scheme. The reason it's got steps in it, that relates to the different build out phases of the project as more and more loads become connected in time. And you can see on the graph that effectively the CO2 emissions reduce as the grid greens and we have lower carbon electricity on the network, against the gas counterfactual, which obviously with more increased loads, you've got more CO2 emissions. The other benefits of doing this is that you've got improved local air quality, plus you're reducing the need for people to have individual gas boilers in their homes, which from a safety point of view reduces the risk of things like carbon monoxide poisoning. So there's lots of other benefits to doing this as well. And also in the UK, there's a target to potentially stop new residential gas connections by 2025. So in the meantime, we need to be thinking of solutions to that pretty quickly. Where are we going to get our heat from if we can't use gas after 2025? We believe that the opportunities within the coal fields do provide a kind of technology ready example that we could use at scale for heat decarbonisation. So just to think about how the mine energy links into the kind of heat network opportunities. So there's a government intention that by 2050, getting towards up towards 40% of heat could be supplied via a heat network. And at the moment it's around about 2%. So obviously we've got a lot of work to do there in getting heat networks through, and that's been very well supported by the Heat Network Delivery Unit and the HNIP funding I mentioned previously, which the local authorities have been accessing, both to undertake feasibility work and for the capital cost of their project as well. And it was just to make the point of how compatible the heat networks are with mine energies. And there's two examples here, the kind of centralised heat networks, which are more traditional, maybe we're more familiar with, and the decentralised networks, which are the ambient loop systems. And I think we've got an opportunity in the UK to learn from other regions where district heating has been more widely adopted. And my feeling is that we could leapfrog straight to these ambient loop systems. Lots of benefits for doing that. Obviously, it requires different economic models, because if people have their own heat pumps at point of use, that's effectively how they're paying for their energy, rather than buying the heat from the network, from the heat network operator. So there's different kind of economic considerations there. But I believe there's a really good opportunity for mine energy to fit very well with heat networks, and particularly with the ambient loop type systems. So in terms of thinking about the smart system and what a smart system could look like, and it's very refreshing, and it kind of reflects back to my time in academia, when you can have a think about these things and what you'd like to do in an ideal world, which is where all these kind of good ideas start from, really. So for me, a smart system, and there's lots of definitions of this around at the moment, but for me, I think it's something that has to have flexibility and be responsive and allow for the integration of other energy sources and other demands. So in this example here, we've got the integration with other sources of heat. So you've got things like data centers which require cooling, so that presents an opportunity for heat reinjection to the subsurface, and I was very interested in Florian's presentation on that, and we'll talk more about that shortly. Then you've also got integrating it with other renewables, so you could look at things like power to X from wind. So at times when there's surplus wind being generated, that X could be heat, and you could then store that within the mine workings. Things like energy from waste plants, again, there's potential that they can be operated to produce more electricity often if there is a demand for the heat. So if you were putting the heat into the subsurface to try and warm that up a bit, then you've potentially got the opportunity to run those plants more efficiently as well. And then other sources such as waste heat from sewage, that again could be connected into this type of system and help to either preserve the reservoir temperature, or if there's an excess of heat, then increase it if that's possible. So thinking about that, and it was very interesting, as I say, to see Florian's presentation about how heat was injected and how it behaved. And that's one thing that we need to do a lot of work on with respect to the subsurface. If you do put it in there, are you going to see it again? And are you going to see it where you think you'll see it? What will you lose? And are the losses significant? Do they matter to the scheme? And does it actually enhance the project by doing this heat injection? Just thinking about the other end of this kind of smart system on the demand side, so what we envisage is the cascade use of the geothermal. So in the example that Bo talked about yesterday at Symposium, we've got the mine water there at 20 degrees. So if we drop the temperature by 5 degrees through that heat exchanger to then supply the housing load there, the 1,400 homes that will be there, if we do that, we've still got water effectively leaving the heat exchanger at that development at 15 degrees, which would be sufficient to then run through another project, such as a horticulture project. So by this cascade use, you're sweating the asset and making the most of the resource, which really helps the economic case. And it also brings other business interests into the area. So you can imagine in the scenario there, you're going to have companies set up to service the heat network and sell the heat. And then if you can have new industries that are attracted by a low carbon source of heat, that's then bringing employment, and it ties into other things such as reducing food miles, for example, if we're growing certain things in the UK that we would be importing otherwise. So there's lots of other benefits to thinking this, and that's what I really like about the mine energy, is it can link all these things together really nicely. I think also the key for a smart system for me is also something that uses storage, because again, that gives you more of that flexibility, resilience, and the potential to respond to rapid changes in demand. So that's something we're really interested in looking at. And we realise there's a lot of work to be done on this. So this is very much at kind of ideas stage at the moment. And the work we've got to do really is to think about what type of targets we might want to go for, and then identify those and then test them to see how they would perform as heat stores. And I guess that would involve doing some R&D and modelling type work, and then also some ground truthing. We have 177,000 mine entries in the UK, and around about 134,000 of those are mine shafts. Unfortunately, lots of those are filled, but we do have several sites where we have shafts that are open. Some we use for pumping for mine water control, and others are used for monitoring and weren't backfilled at the time. So we've got those as potential to look at, and some sites and common to many sites where you would have an upcast and a downcast shaft, we have pairs of open shafts, which also gives you a bit of flexibility as well. And the reason we're interested in using the shafts is that their kind of structure being tall, thin structures, they can act as a thermal flask. and that gives you the potential to layer water at different temperatures within them, so the thermodynamic performance could be quite good. But what we need to understand more about is if we were to put heat into these systems, and there are some smaller scale experiments that have been done on this, but if we were to do this at scale, how would the heat behave? And as I mentioned before, would you ever see it again? So are there connections into those shafts to the rest of the mine where the heat would be lost? Do you need to insulate the shaft and do some work on it, or could you use it as it is and just rely on the properties of the rock, and you would charge that with heat as well, and then use it? So there's lots of questions like that that we want to answer before we could take this forwards. And then in addition to looking at the shafts as well, we also think that there's potential in looking at discrete areas of workings. So obviously in the example Florian showed and the project at Heelan, the mine is quite a discrete mine. In the UK, a lot of our mines are highly interconnected, but we do have some that either have isolated areas within the mine or are fairly small mines themselves. So we need to identify those targets and have a look at them in terms of, proximity to potential end users and proximity to the heat sources that might be fed into them if we were going to use something like a data center, for example, and just see what the appropriateness of them would be for storage. So as I've said, this is very much at an R&D stage for us, but this is the concept we're kind of putting forward. And we're thinking, could it work? And the advantage for us is that we're using, all of this thing is using existing technology, the heat pumps, the heat exchangers, any drilling you need to do. It's established technology, it's just a new deployment of it. And it's technology ready, and we've got the infrastructure there to use. So, let's see if we can take advantage of that as much as possible. So to summarise, there's a whole range of opportunities offered by mine energy, and just thinking about it globally, because I realise we have an international audience today, from some work I did when I was in academia, having a look at the number of projects available, there's around about 30 projects running globally on a variety of different scales and for a variety of different applications. Which does highlight the versatility of mine energy as a low carbon energy source. Can make it difficult when somebody says, give me a ballpark cost for developing a scheme, because they're all so different. It's very hard to do that. But again, the flip side is the fact that it's very versatile. And for us in the UK, the mine energy does align with a variety of government strategies, such as clean growth strategy, the 10-point plan, which recently came out around about Christmas time, that has intentions for a lot more heat pumps to be used for heat supply. That obviously fits well with mine water heat networks. Our industrial strategies, and also kind of the green recovery strategy post-COVID, there's an opportunity for heat networks and mine energy to be part of that. So we've got these opportunities to think about the role of mine energy in a smart system, especially where we can integrate it with other energy sources and other demands. And the column on the right just gives you an idea of the range of opportunities and also some of the wider benefits that we come across. And something I haven't mentioned, and I noticed there's a couple of questions about kind of community engagement in the chat. But we find when we've talked to people, and previously when I was in academia, we talked to people about these schemes, generally where there's still people living in the area that was mined, that remember the miners or were miners themselves or have family members that were, there's a feeling that they would very much like to see this resource used again. And the interest in the mine energy has been, what can it do for us? Because we saw the coal being mined here, taken away and traded. But obviously the heat doesn't travel too well. So when you tell them, well, heat has to be used locally so it can be used to your benefit, then people find that quite an interesting idea. So I think it does offer real opportunities for regeneration, and the Heelan project in the Netherlands has also provided a really good example of that. So obviously I'm biased because I've been working on mines for 20 years and I'm absolutely hooked on them. But I hope that this presentation has given you an idea of some of the things we're interested in doing, what we're doing now, and how we'd like to see this develop going forwards. And I'll just end by saying you can send me an email if you want to know more, or I'm on LinkedIn. Our website has got some more information on some of the projects we're working on. And from my past life in academia, we've got a paper coming out soon which looks at geothermal. We actually used a deep geothermal source and a mine energy source against other technologies as part of a heat network. So that will be coming out soon through the IET journal. If anybody's interested, then please have a look. Thank you very much.